Shockwaves ripped through the WWE Universe on June 20th, 2025, when a SmackDown main event erupted into chaos and rewrote the narrative heading into the highly anticipated Night of Champions. Fans tuning in to see a standard title defense between John Cena and R-Truth got far more than they bargained for. What unfolded was less a match than a war declaration. Cena, the legendary 16-time world champion, suffered a rare defeat by disqualification after a controversial series of moves that stunned viewers and commentators alike. But what truly detonated the night's energy was what happened after the bell. As R-Truth stood in disbelief over the inconclusive victory, Cena, face flushed with rage, snapped. Without warning, he leveled CM Punk, who had been ringside, and then turned his fury on R-Truth himself, slamming him with the very belt he had just risked. The crowd's cheers turned to gasps, some even booing as Cena stood over the wreckage he'd created. This wasn't the face of hustle, loyalty, and respect. This was something darker, something dangerous. And it wasn't lost on anyone watching that this incident took place just days before his scheduled clash with Punk at Night of Champions. Cena had crossed a line, one he couldn't uncross. The WWE Universe suddenly wasn't just looking at a match on June 28th, they were looking at a reckoning. What made the moment so surreal was the man behind the aggression. John Cena has always been the moral compass of WWE, a larger-than-life figure whose brand has been built on principles, discipline, and an ironclad sense of sportsmanship. But on this night, those foundations cracked. The frustration had been building in subtle glances and increasingly sharp promos in the weeks prior, but no one expected the explosion to come so violently and so personally. CM Punk, his longtime rival, his philosophical opposite, his shadow in many ways, had clearly gotten under Cena's skin once again, reviving a decade-old rivalry that once defined an entire era of professional wrestling. And then there was R-Truth, a beloved underdog who had earned this title shot through grit and charisma. For Cena to lash out at him felt particularly cruel. It was as if the mask had dropped, revealing the toll of years of pressure, scrutiny, and the creeping realization that he was no longer the unquestioned hero. The WWE Universe erupted online. Was Cena turning heel? Was this the beginning of a psychological collapse, or just a ruthless strategy to weaken his opponent ahead of the biggest match of the year? Either way, what happened that night wasn't just an ending. It was the start of something far more volatile. Social media platforms lit up in real time, with fans dissecting every frame of the post-match carnage. Twitter/X flooded with hashtags like #CenaSnaps and #Truth deserved better, while Reddit threads exploded with theories about Cena's mental state. Even longtime commentators seemed unsure how to frame it. Was this a storyline twist or a real-time breakdown? Some fans applauded the move, calling it the old ruthless aggression Cena they'd missed, while others mourned what they saw as the death of a legend's integrity. Podcasts, blogs, and sports talk shows seized on the controversy, turning Cena's chair shots into cultural commentary. Analysts noted how Cena didn't just attack Punk. He obliterated the man without hesitation, without showmanship. This wasn't theater. It was raw, unscripted fury. And the fact that it came at the expense of both a trusted ally and a nemesis sent a clear message. Cena wasn't just there to win, he was there to end. And as the dust settled, only one question lingered in the minds of millions. What kind of man would walk out at Night of Champions? And what would he be willing to destroy to prove he still mattered? But what followed in the days after the SmackDown implosion was a wave of division, distrust, and disbelief, turning what was once a clear-cut rivalry into a psychological minefield. Fans who had idolized John Cena for nearly 2 decades now found themselves questioning not just his actions, but his intentions. Was this a cold-blooded tactic to get inside CM Punk's head before Night of Champions? Or had Cena finally cracked under the immense weight of expectation, legacy, and time? Even WWE's on-air commentators didn't shy away from framing the situation as a moral crisis. Michael Cole asked aloud, "Has John Cena lost control, or is this the most dangerous version of him we've ever seen?" Punk, meanwhile, wasted no time capitalizing on the fallout. In a scathing promo on RAW, he tore into Cena's actions, accusing him of being a fading relic of a system that chews people up and spits them out. Punk even went so far as to say that Cena's attack on R-Truth was not about dominance. It was about desperation. And the crowd, split and volatile, reacted with a mixture of jeers and chants. Some still cheered Cena, clinging to the hope that his outburst was justified, while others booed, sensing a betrayal of everything he once stood for. Backstage reports swirled of locker room tension, with younger talent allegedly shaken by Cena's abrupt turn. The normally buttoned-up corporate face of WWE was suddenly unpredictable, unrecognizable, and, perhaps for the first time, truly dangerous. Meanwhile, R-Truth, who had poured heart and soul into earning his title shot, was reportedly injured and pulled from the next few events, further fueling speculation that Cena's rage had real consequences. And in that uncertainty, the WWE landscape began to shift. The Night of Champions was no longer just a match between 2 titans. It was a collision course of unfinished business, bruised egos, and irreparable legacies. Cena wasn't just coming for the win, he was coming to burn something down. Even industry veterans began to weigh in, with legends like Mick Foley and Booker T issuing cryptic responses during media appearances. Foley called the moment Cena's most disturbing chapter yet, while Booker T suggested that this ain't the Cena you bring home to meet the kids. WWE's official Twitter account posted a slow-motion replay of the belt strike with the caption, "Redemption or Revenge?" leaving fans to decipher the messaging behind the promotion itself. As CM Punk made his entrance, chants of "Best in the World" echoed with renewed passion, but even those were soon drowned by the roar that accompanied Cena's arrival. Except this time, the cheers weren't unanimous. There were audible boos, an undercurrent of uncertainty in the reception of a man once universally revered. Dressed in all black instead of his signature neon colors, Cena stood at the entrance ramp with an intensity that bordered on haunting. Gone was the smile, the salute, the crowd-pandering energy. This was not a return. It was a reckoning. From the opening bell, the match abandoned any pretense of sportsmanship. It was a brawl, brutal, methodical. CM Punk, ever the technician, tried to wear Cena down with submission holds and strategic strikes, but Cena was relentless, cold, calculated, and more vicious than he had ever been in a WWE ring. Every suplex felt like a statement, every stomp, a message. And when he slammed Punk into the announce table, the crowd didn't cheer, they held their breath. Midway through the match, a moment of eerie symbolism unfolded. Punk, bleeding from a cut near his eye, stared Cena down and mouthed something that cameras caught. "This isn't you." But Cena didn't flinch. He simply smirked and delivered a thunderous AA onto steel steps outside the ring. The crowd erupted, not in celebration, but in disbelief. Even the commentary team was stunned into silence. Punk's body lay motionless as Cena stood above him, face expressionless, belt in hand like a war trophy. The referee checked on Punk, considered stopping the match, but the defiant veteran crawled back into the ring. He wasn't just fighting Cena, he was fighting for the version of Cena that fans still wanted to believe in. The final minutes were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Cena taunted the audience, mimicked Punk's iconic poses, and stared into the hard camera as if daring the world to judge him. When he finally pinned Punk, 1, 2, 3, the bell rang like a funeral toll. Cena didn't celebrate. He didn't raise the belt. He simply stood there, above his fallen rival, and absorbed the deafening mix of shock, boos, and reluctant awe. The man who walked into Night of Champions was not the man fans thought they knew. The man who walked out? He was something else entirely, and the world couldn't look away. WWE aired a black and white vignette later that night, juxtaposing Cena's most heroic moments, saluting troops, granting wishes, overcoming odds, with slow-motion footage of his recent brutality. The caption? "Every hero becomes the villain if he lives long enough." And just like that, the conversation shifted. Was this a heel turn or a brutal self-actualization? Backstage, reports emerged that Cena had been pushing for creative control over his final WWE run, determined to craft a story that felt more honest, more raw than anything he'd done before. He didn't want to go out waving the same flag. He wanted to show what happens when the weight of being the standard bearer becomes too much. And for many, that rang true. Former rivals began posting cryptic support, Randy Orton tweeted a single line, "Finally, he's free." Even The Rock commented during a podcast appearance saying, "Cena's finally not playing a character." That's the scariest version of him yet. CM Punk, however, refused to give him that grace. In a post-match interview, bruised and defiant, he said, "Don't call that man a legend. Call him what he is. A man who let fear turn him into everything he once fought against." But even that bitterness couldn't erase what had happened. Cena had forced the industry, and its audience, to face an uncomfortable truth. Heroes are not immune to time. They bend, they break, and sometimes they choose to destroy rather than be discarded. And yet, in the weeks that followed, something unexpected began to take shape. Younger superstars began referencing Cena's transformation as a moment of liberation. They weren't just talking about storyline, they were talking about the right to evolve, to express rage, to show flaws without being punished for it. Cena, perhaps unknowingly, had kicked open a door no one dared touch before. And in doing so, he redefined what legacy looks like. Not a static statue of moral perfection, but a living, breathing, breaking force that dares to rewrite itself until the very end. Whether you loved it or hated it, one thing was undeniable. John Cena's final chapter wouldn't be a curtain call. It would be a wildfire, one that scorched everything you thought you knew, and left behind something raw, unsettling, and unforgettable.